So I think we've got a theist here who is in Croatia, which is exciting. Tio,
Yes.
and you want to
Hello.
talk about polytheistic worldviews mixing with Christian worldviews.
Yeah, not actually mixing not necessarily, because I think that a lot of people just choose one. I'm also doing the same. I'm a heathen. That's how I think. But I'm thinking about the possibility of a heathen experiencing the divinity of a Christian God, or perhaps a Christian acknowledging that hidden gods exist, because this happened to me, and I've seen people say that both exist, like in the spiritual world, I guess. Not
when you say you're a heathen, what does that briefly? What is a heathen to you? What does that mean? You believe in multiple gods? Is that what you're saying?
Polytheist, and just basically not a Christian. Basically, just the old God.
Really quick, are you on speakerphone by any chance? I'm just having a little bit of a hard time hearing you.
I have a laptop. I don't know how it works.
Okay.
It's just a laptop. I can't hear myself.
Okay. That's fine. That's fine. We'll be able to make it work. So I guess what I'm wondering is, when we're talking about experiences with gods, how, and the key word is how do you tell the difference between an experience you're having with a god and something that's just the product of your imagination?
Because the god or gods would make sense somehow on your journey. It would reveal to you that it makes sense and that it's logical. You know, it wouldn't be something that just exists for fun. Like, maybe yes, it's fun, but somehow it's spiritual knowledge. It works.
Sometimes, though, I imagine. Hang on a sec. So the thing is, though, like, I imagine things that are I imagine things that are rational and make sense too. Like, when I'm thinking about maths, for example, geometry, I can imagine like triangles fitting together and making like a hexagon, and that's something that I'm imagining in my mind, and I could imagine what all the different angles are and work on, and it's all rational. It's all totally provably true. Are you saying that I could only reach that with a god, or are you saying that, like, what are you saying here?
Let's try to make this really like even simpler. So Teo, just really quick, and I promise I'll shut up. But based on what Katy just said, would you agree it is possible for people to imagine things that are logical and that make sense?
Yes, of course.
Okay. So
basically the mind somehow, I guess.
All right. So then the question's still on the table. Yeah. How do we tell the difference between experiencing a god and something that's just a product of our imagination?
The god would reveal something to you, in my opinion, and it happens, and the spiritual path would have been walked upon by others in the past, and they would tell you a little bit about it, and then it would help you shape your path.
But I could do that. So I could give you some advice, couldn't I? I could say, you know, like, as a person who's experienced in whatever, you know, engineering, I could tell you, oh, here's some advice. Make sure you do the maths first or whatever. And that's revealing something to you. And it's like a path I've trodden down before. And I could give you some, probably bad example there, but I could give you some fairly wise advice in some things that I'm an expert in. What's the difference between that and a god?
About how it all works together, you know, but maybe a Christian would just have to have the faith or the mystical stuff, like the runes and so on.
Okay.
The runes are not explained to everyone the same way, I guess.
Is it possible to believe things on faith that aren't true? Or to believe things on faith that are just, you know, imaginary?
I don't know, because it wouldn't matter. It would not really have any purpose to it. It would just exist in some kind of hole where it doesn't.
It could matter a lot. Like, if you didn't believe, if you believed in a faith in your mind that you could cure a bacterial infection by drinking strawberry tea, and you had no evidence, then that would be really bad, because rather than taking antibiotics, you would drink strawberry tea, and then you would get ill and possibly die.
You would
I was
have
just
to be able to think of something that doesn't exist, like the ghosts for somebody who doesn't believe in them. or
Wait a minute. How
in
do you
them.
know ghosts don't exist?
I don't know. Perhaps
that's
they
the
do.
right answer.
I haven't seen one yet, but
Right.
it could only be it could also be a concept about something, and then you would see it for what the person who invented it would wanted to say with it.
Well, the reason I asked about the ghost thing and how you know they don't exist is because it sounds to me so far that all of the paths to believing in experiencing a God that you're trying to walk us down are paths that people walk down to believe in things like ghosts and spirits and psychics and all kinds of stuff. So, but if we really care about whether the things we believe are true, then how can we know we've had an experience with a God?
Because you would know that it's somehow connected to the divine. It wouldn't be something that's just mundane
How do you know?
and regular.
Yeah. So again, it's how. So I was like, how can you know you've had an experience with a God? And you're saying, well, because the experience would be divine and you would know it. I'm asking how.
I don't
How?
know. Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had a load of experiences. How do I know which one's by God?
The world and the life and the soul, the existence is divine. It's not that you would have to see something that doesn't exist. You would see it in the nature and your feelings and the good things in life and the bad things in life. It would also somehow be explained by the elements in the religion.
This, I mean, no offense, but this does sound like super hand wavy and vague, because I mean, I have experiences and emotions, and I see the nature, and I see the good and the bad, and I feel like things sometimes make sense and all this kind of stuff, but I don't see, like, how do I know when that's a God or not? If I go out into nature and I feel like, wow, this is amazing.
If you're a theist, I guess that's a part of where the God manifests. Otherwise, you could say that God only exists in your dreams or something like that.
Well, see, but the claim is that the God manifests. But what I'm asking is how can we justify acting like that's a true statement? Why should anybody believe that a God has manifested anywhere?
Otherwise, you would just have to say that he exists in the metaphysical realm somewhere else, and then he would serve a different purpose because he would just explain some things about a hypothetical universe. And
there's another option, which would be to go, if there's not evidence for the God and we can't explain how we could tell the difference between God and our imagination, maybe you don't believe in the God. Maybe you just go, I don't know. I have some experiences and they're wild, but I'm not justified in calling them God experiences without evidence.
Yeah, because if we just agree with you and we say the experiences, hang on a sec. If we would just agree and say, these experiences are the gods in a metaphysical realm, whatever. Like, this reasoning you're using could be used to prove anything, really, couldn't it? This is like a classic atheist thing, but you could say, well, what's the difference between that and like a genie or something?
Yeah.
No, but if it helped you somehow because it was a part of you, then you were somehow involved. I mean, if it didn't matter at all, then it's not really spiritual, or it is, but then it could just be like another living being on the planet, like an animal, which is still somehow spiritual because it has the consciousness and it can see and live.
Not all living things have a consciousness, though, right? Because not all living things even have a brain.
Yeah, not about everything at once, but they have a consciousness. And now, you can focus on what you can focus on. I mean, I don't think everyone is capable of tremendous multitasking. So.
Well, we
I
would agree
think
there.
I think we can quite conclusively say that not every living thing has a consciousness, because like even it's very hard to define, even know what consciousness is, but like
But
I think we can confidently say it requires a brain, or it requires some kind of.
And if we're going to start talking about living things, what does it mean for something to be alive?
Like viruses. Oh, I learned the coolest wasp fact ever. I'm going to say it off the
Well,
top.
can we hear the coolest wasp fact ever? I want to hear the coolest wasp fact ever.
Even the tree or the rock is somehow alive. It somehow matters because it's somehow there, and you can't say that it doesn't exist. So it lives, I guess, a rock.
Ooh, is the time?
Ooh, but somehow it exists. It exists in the plane of living things, in the material universe.
Let me ask you this: if you can't prove something doesn't exist, is that a good time to believe that it does exist?
Maybe, but you'll never know if it only exists for you or for everyone.
Well, I don't think of existence as being something that's subjective. Like something would exist for me and not for someone else. You know what I mean? I'm wondering about this though. I cannot prove that there's not like a tiny leprechaun that lives up my ass and that I'm basically being like puppeted by a tiny leprechaun, right? That's, for lack of a better word, a soul.
That one's
but I don't have any reason to I don't have any reason to believe that thing exists, even if I can't prove it doesn't. That the invisible puppet master ass leprechaun, I don't think the time. Yeah, right. I don't think the time to believe in such a thing is when I can't prove it doesn't exist. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yes.
I know it's a silly example, but
it's not a dog or a man. It's a leprechaun. You can only prove it for the people who will acknowledge it. It's sort of like a god, sort of, because it is very much like a god in many many ways. Anyway, little gods. Yeah.
Let today be the day that everyone bookmarks this as the day that a theist caller acknowledged that a god is very much like an invisible leprechaun that lives up your ass. Yeah.
Well,
on that note,
I think it's been an interesting discussion, Tio, but we've got a lot of callers lined up and there's some really cool topics we want to cover, and I want to crack out this amazing wasp fact. I think it would be cool for you to go away and consider what exactly you think would be like the evidence or the way of telling the difference between a god telling you something and you just coming up with it on your own. Like how we know, like how could we look at 100 different instances of someone learning something and say 100% of the time which one of them were given by God and which one of them weren't. And that would make a really good call next time. But thank you very much for calling in, and we will talk to you again. So wait, this wasp fact, sorry, I haven't just been thinking about wasps the whole time, but I kind of had, because we were saying what's the difference between like living and not living, and the classic is like, is a virus alive? And I found also all of these like lines in biology are actually really blurry and really difficult when you get down to them. And even like what is a different species and what isn't. For example, most of the cells in the human body are actually bacteria cells in terms of number of cells, but obviously the volume is mainly human cells because they're bigger cells. But that's like really interesting, because could you have a human without the bacteria? Would it even be able to exist? Like, that's key for your function. And then even within cells, there's parts where it's like this part came from a virus. But I've recently learned about this wasp, most wasps are parasitic wasps in that they lay their eggs inside a living creature and then the babies come out and eat it alive and come out. But they actually have all kinds of more mad stuff going on, because obviously if you inject something into something with an immune system, then the immune system fights back and it would kill the babies. And so lots of different creatures have different ways of dealing with this. Like they either dodge the immune system in some way, like malaria does, or there's a whole range of different things. But there's actually one wasp which in its ovaries has all the components of a virus, but like separated out. And then when it goes to inject its eggs with its ovipositor, it like combines these proteins together and it actually makes a virus, which it injects into this caterpillar. I think it's the tobacco worm caterpillar or something like that. And it creates a virus which then attacks the immune system of the caterpillar and eats the components of it and basically gives the caterpillar the equivalent of AIDS. So it has no immune system at all. And then the wasp babies take hold in there. And then this virus is eventually defeated by the caterpillar and it gets a new immune system. But by that time, it's too late. But like, what I think is so fascinating about this is that part of the wasp? Like the wasp actually creates the virus. So it's not that this is a symbiotic relationship between the wasp and the virus in the traditional sense. It's like the wasp is, in one sense, birthing a virus, and in another, completely relying on it for its life cycle. Anyway, really fascinating. Wasps are cool. Your face says you love that.
I mean, as much as I love, you know, the stories about caterpillar AIDS as much as the next guy, I'm just sitting here thinking that nature's freaking gross and crazy. Next time someone tells me about how perfect creation is and how everything's evidence of God, I'm gonna be like, even caterpillar AIDS, and just see what they say.
Wasp injected caterpillar AIDS.
Yeah.
Oh, I've got so many wasp facts. I think we need to do a separate show after this one where I just talk about wasp facts.